In this drawing, we're going to take a look at how to draw a fish, and we're going to take it step by step using very simple shapes. We'll start with a couple of ovals here, and then we'll just draw another shape coming off the back of that middle oval, which will be the beginnings of our tail. We're going to draw very loosely here at the beginning stages, and then when we're ready, once we've established a nice structure from which to develop the drawing further, we'll go in with our finished material, which for you could be ink or a heavier application of graphite. We'll also go ahead and start to add some of the fins. Of course, we've got the dorsal fin, we've got the fin on the side of the fish, which comes out of that first oval that we drew, and then of course the tail fin. We'll go ahead and connect the shapes here to create the overall shape of the body of the fish. And then we're ready to move on to the next step, which is going to be to establish just a couple of lines here to indicate the gills of the fish. And there's a little flap that happens right behind the head, so we'll indicate a little line for that as well. We can also carve off the shape of the mouth here off of that first oval that we drew, and then we'll draw a couple of circles for the eye. Now there is a line that extends down the body of the fish, and that line kind of comes up from the first oval that we drew, and then it goes back down towards the tail fin. We'll also indicate a few of the lines that exist on the fins here. Then there's a couple more fins that exist on the bottom of the fish. And of course, we'll add the lines that exist inside of those fins as well. Now we've got a pretty good idea of the shape of the fish, and our lines are lightly drawn. Now we can go over the top of it with our finished material. You may choose to use ink for this, or you may choose to just bear down a little bit heavier on the graphite pencil. When we draw our lines here, we want to make sure that we have a variety of line quality, so we'll have the line be a little bit thicker in areas and a little bit thinner in areas, and that will add interest to your drawing. That variety in line can be very subtle. It doesn't have to be very extreme, but just a little bit of difference in the line being thicker and thinner in some areas will make your drawing look a whole lot more interesting. Of course, we're going to start by establishing the contour lines or the outlines of things, and we'll go back in and add some shading or value in just a moment. We'll leave a little bit of an area of highlight in the middle portion of that eye. And we're going to go ahead and darken in the shape of the mouth there, just so that it looks like there's some shadow in there and you can go into the mouth. Then of course we'll continue on adding our lines over the top of the fins, the lines that we drew for the gills, and then of course the lines that we drew inside of each one of the fins. And this is a really simple approach to drawing things, but it's one that I recommend that you take. And what I mean by that is starting with the basic shapes and slowly build up the drawing as you go. Start with loose lines at the beginning, very light lines, and then as you get more confident with the shapes that you have on the surface, you can put more pressure or go to that finished material over the top of your sketch that you've created. We'll put a few more lines on the front of the face here for some interest, and then we'll start to create some of the pattern texture that happens on the back of the fish. And I'm just making small little circles for this. Of course, you want the circles to be a little bit bigger in areas and a little bit smaller in areas so that we have the variety. And you don't want to get too calculated with these marks. There should be some randomness to it. And we'll go all the way down the back of the fish here with these textural marks, these little speckles that exist on the fish. We'll also put a few lines here at the edge of the tail fin. Alright, now that we've got our line drawing complete, we're going to need to add a bit of value here. What value is the darkness or lightness of a color. So basically we're going to add some shading here to make the fish appear more interesting. And to do that, I'm going to switch over to a brush here. I'm using a graphics tablet for this that's similar to a watercolor mark to produce these lines, but you may choose to shade with your graphite pencil, or you may use charcoal for this and blend it around with a blending stump, or maybe with your finger. We're just going to add a bit of value or shading to the top of the fish to add some contrast with the white part of the bottom of the fish. And most of this value exists on the top portion of the fish, and then it fades down as it goes down towards the belly of the fish. Right above that line that we drew going down the whole portion of the body, there's a little bit of a white area that happens, so we'll be careful to stay away from that area as we're adding this value. Now, the darker tones do exist underneath that line. And you can be pretty loose with this application. It's going to make it look more natural if you are. If you get too stiff and try to shade too precisely, it can make your drawing look a bit stiff. And of course we'll add a bit of shading to the fins as well. And we'll just clean things up a little bit with the eraser. Maybe make the top portion a little bit darker. And then we'll go back and clean that eye up a little bit. I'm going to make the pupil part, I guess that's what it's called, a little bit larger, and then place that white highlight back in there. So here's a quick little look at how you can draw a fish. For more tutorials like this one, be sure to visit sketchbooknation.com.